right, let's all get seated and get ready.
Oh, you got makeup yet, Ann?
Lighting doesn't help us, does it?
Where is the agenda? Order should I put Steve Jobs out at charge?
All right. I would like to call this meeting to order. This is an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Government. It's being held in our headquarters in Washington, streamed live on the internet. Let me start by welcoming you, Ann.
Thank you very much.
Ann Stock is representing Secretary Clinton, and you're the acting or interim, I can't remember, Undersecretary of State,
I am
right?
the
Current Assistant Secretary.
Assistant Secretary of State, R.
Okay. And already had a wonderful, I mean, we've known each other for quite a while, but a wonderful morning with the rest of the board. And I thank you for being here. And let me also just say how much we enjoyed being with Judith McHale when she was Undersecretary. So the State Department and.
She enjoyed being on this board, and I think that you all would significantly.
Right. And some of the significant things she was involved with, we were already discussing today, and we'll talk some more about. Speaking of which, working with the State Department, Judith McHale, and then Inders Winbush, Michael Meehan will have a report later in the meeting. But our strategy committee has, for an entire year, been asking a very simple question. We've been very open about it, had a lot of open meetings about it, had a lot of hearings about it, which is how would you really design a U.S. media networks if you were designing it for the 21st century. We did discuss that this morning, and I want to be very open and say that I think we have come up with some very good ideas, and we are going to proceed and pursue some of those ideas step by step, with Dick Lobo taking charge of somebody who would be helping to implement some of the ideas that we have that would make a more integrated, more coherent strategy in the future. And since we've always been open about the fact that we're doing this, and I just wanted to report that we spent our morning in a strategy session and we'll continue to proceed. But even more important than strategy, there's only one thing more important than strategy, and that's the safety of our journalists. And that includes all journalists who do important work in without obstacles and interference from their governments. Since we last met, there have been incidents involving journalists working for Radio Free Europe in Belarus and the BBC journalists in Tajikistan. BBG has issued statements in both cases. I and my fellow members of the board share the joy of the BBC World Service on the release in Tajikistan of Envoy Usmanov, and we hope Tajik officials will formally clear him the false accusations against him and the restrictions of his ability to speak to the media. And I'd love to turn to Governor Dennis Mulhaupt, who chairs the RFERL Board of Directors, to give us an update on the situation in Belarus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We continue to be concerned about the events in Belarus. The RFE, Radio Free Europe Belarus service correspondents in Minsk have been harassed, beaten, detained, and at least 2 cases tried and convicted on spurious charges for trying to report on a series of peaceful protests over the past several weeks in Minsk and throughout other cities in Belarus. RFE journalists have also had equipment seized and damaged by Belarusian police officers. In addition, RFE websites were briefly affected by a cyber attack on July 3rd that may have been linked to the Belarus service's coverage of the protests, and on July 8th, the service discovered that its YouTube page had been cloned. Minsk-based correspondent Ale Gerzilovich has been detained and released without charge 5 separate times since June 22nd, while covering either the protests or the trials of detained protesters. On July 6th, Gerzilovich and correspondent Alice Dashkasinski were detained while trying to cover the protests. Most recently, Gerzilovich was detained while leaving the site of one of yesterday's protest actions in Minsk. He was grabbed by plainclothes police as he waited for a subway train, brutally dragged out of the station and taken by police van to a precinct station where he's fingerprinted and photographed but not charged with any crimes. On June 3rd, police tried to confiscate one Belarus service reporter's video camera and smashed another's camera lens as the correspondents were trying to cover protests in Minsk and in other cities in Belarus. Several correspondents were detained and released, including RFE's correspondent in the western city of Grodno, Mikhail Kornievich. On July 11th, Kornievich was tried and fined. We continue to monitor the situation in Belarus, and obviously we hope for an improvement in the situation there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dennis. The board held its last formal meeting here in headquarters, and it was structured as an open meeting with public participation in the auditorium. I think that was the first time in BBG history. We also met that time with the Secretary of State, which was nice as membership of the board. The minutes of the June board meeting are found behind tab 1 in the briefing book. Are there any comments on the minutes?
I would move the minutes be approved, Mr. Chairman.
And is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The BBG is a federal agency with an international mission, and the legislative history of the Broadcasting Act, the constitutional statute of the BBG, clearly establishes that we're a critical instrument of U.S. foreign policy. There's been some discussion of, governors' travel or whatever. We've been very, very careful with governors' travel over the past few years because we want to make sure we're not wasting taxpayers' money and that the money that we have from the taxpayers is really going to journalists and reporting. And so I think the amount of trips that had no purpose has been reduced to 0. That does mean there are some trips with a real purpose to it. And since our last meeting, there have been a couple of very important trips. And so I'd love to have Governor McHugh, Susan, if I sometimes call her, report on the Africa strategy trip.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governors Meehan, Perino, and myself had an incredibly productive trip to Ethiopia, Sudan, and Nigeria, and I'm just going to give you a real brief overview. The purpose of the trip was to set forth the strategy, our Africa strategy, that we agreed upon as a board in January. More specifically, we wanted to talk about getting more FM licensing. We wanted to talk about more health and development broadcasting because, as we talked about earlier in our board meeting today, we know that's a particular area of interest in Africa, which I might add is a real opportunity for us to grow our audiences as a continent. We also wanted to pursue media training, and we wanted to, of course, meet with our BBG staff in the field, and we wanted to call attention to our work over there. In each country, we went with ambassadors, we did country briefs, we did as much media as we could, we did blogging and tweeting along the way, we did media interviews. In Nigeria and southern Sudan, we held town hall meetings, which were wonderfully engaging with the local community on the ground, and it was just terrific exposure for VOA and U.S. international broadcasting as a whole. In terms of accomplishments in South Sudan, the government agreed to FM licensing, to media training, to technical support. We announced a new VOA African network. We did that at a town hall meeting, which went over very well. That will essentially be the aggregation of a lot of our global health reporting as it's relevant to Africa, and then we will distribute it through our affiliates. We also received the Nigerian Vice President's support for FM licensing. It was a wonderful meeting that we had with him, and he was incredibly gracious and receptive to everything that VOA is doing over in Nigeria, which is another really important audience and market for us. We signed new affiliate deals in Nigeria. We, of course, like I said, publicized VOA everywhere we went in the local media. We did a lot of interviews. We did press conferences, and post facto, we feel like there was a lot of productive BBG and state collaboration that took place. There's a lot of next steps to this trip. We did three countries in 8 days, so we got a lot done. These days were packed. We didn't waste a minute over there, and that follow-up is taking place now. And I really want to personally thank, on behalf of my fellow governors, Bruce Sherman and Joan Maurer, who were on the trip with us every step of the way, and the entire staff of BBG and VOA really did an incredible prep job, and I know that they're all working on the follow-up to everything that I just ticked through. But our accomplishments there were measurable and significant, and it couldn't have happened without the staff. So thank you all. In terms of just a couple little issues I want to raise, I know Dana And I, in particular, wanted to raise things that we wanted to follow up on, in addition to all the good things that I went over. We were a little concerned about stringer salaries and our VOA staff out in the field and how much attention they were getting, and that's something we'd like to look into with the staff. And then the other thing we want to talk more about is our relationship with USAID out in the field and how we can better collaborate on resources and broadcasting. So those are sort of the two issues that we bumped into wherever we went, and we thought it was worth mentioning to the board at the meeting.
Yeah,
So that's
it's very good that USAID and state, are very coordinated these
Yes, they
days. And we have, a chance to improve the relationship with USAID. Thank you very much, Susan. And I'm not sure if this is supposed to be later for the meeting, but wearing another hat on the board, you have pushed us forward in the digital and network and innovation realm. And I noticed a couple of the people that you helped bring aboard have wandered into the meeting again after
Are they
reporting
here?
to us today, I think, right? And you might introduce them to the rest of the
Absolutely.
world
Oh,
via
I'm so
this
glad you're here.
webcast.
I know this board has heard me talk many times at our meetings about our DigiNatives that would be coming on board to really elevate through technology and innovation the content that we're putting out, new content, peer-to-peer engagement on the ground, and just essentially do anything they can to amplify and grow our audiences. And so they're here, and we did a search, and we think we found the best talent in the country to help us in our mission, and that is Raina Kumra over there and Rob Bowl at the end of the table. So just wave and welcome, and we're thrilled that you're here.
Thank you very much. Governor Mullup recently visited with officials from the two of our partner organizations, Deutsche Welle and the BBC, and perhaps Governor Mullup, as I'll call Dennis now, could give a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As everyone knows, I think one of the strategic priorities of this board is to increase our international cooperation with our international partners. And to that end, a few months ago, Deutsche Welle, the German international broadcaster, asked for an official visit to Radio Free Europe in Prague. And that in and of itself was quite a unique, it doesn't seem like it, perhaps it would be, but quite a unique thing. In the past, Deutsche Welle has only wanted to deal with the VOA. And I think it's a great testament that they came and found that there were many interesting things happening in other parts of U.S. international broadcasting. So they asked to come to Prague, and they asked actually that I come and meet them, which, as it turns out, was a fortuitous thing for me to do. And I'll tell you why in a second. But it's a good time to be engaging more actively and more intensively with our international partners, like Deutsche Welle, like the BBC. There are massive changes going on in the world of international broadcasting. In significant cutbacks. Deutsche Welle is going through cutbacks. Our partners in the BBC and in Radio Netherlands are also going through really significant cutbacks. So it's incumbent on us to figure out how we can do things together. And I tried to make the point during the visit that we don't see this as competitive. I mean, of course, we do compete with these organizations, but we're all on the same side. We are trying to have the same fundamental mission of advancing democracy and freedom and a free press. And we have many on-the-ground areas of cooperation, including research, including technical expertise, which we hope will increase in the future. So they were very useful conversations and a visit with Deutsche Welle in Prague. We thank Radio Free Europe for hosting that. But it was fortuitous, I said, and the reason was because I left for Prague on Friday, and that day we elected the new president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And that, when the Deutsche Welle visit was planned, we had no idea that was going to be what happened. And I would like to introduce the new president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Steve Korn, and welcome him again. This, I think, is well, I guess maybe we did that in the last meeting, but in any event, it was great that we had the
He
Deutsche...
gave his Castro speech at the auditorium at
That's
the last
right,
public
that's
meeting.
right.
No, it was a nice short speech.
that we were able to go immediately after his election and introduce him to the staff in Prague and by video to the bureaus. So that was very useful. Then I personally was going to be in London on personal business, so it didn't actually cost the BBC anything. I'll just make that point for the record. or the BBG, anything. And met with the BBC. And Jeff and I went to the BBC, and we were actually had more or less a full day. It was divided in half. First half, we met with the BBC has gone through a change of governance and has a completely new structure. So we met with the vice chairman of the new governing board of the vice chairperson of the new governing board of the BBC, which is called the BBC Trust. And we had a very interesting conversation about governance and about impact measurements and the work they're doing on impact. Then we moved across London to Broadcasting House, which is their traditional headquarters. But the interesting thing about that is they've spent £1 billion building a new broadcast center. It's really very interesting. If any of you are in London, I would urge you to see it. I actually think the board it would be useful to see it. They're doing a lot of very interesting things. Like, for example, they have merged their newsrooms, their domestic and their international newsrooms. So BBC Domestic, BBC World Service now have a common newsroom in London. And we had some great conversations with them there about areas that we can cooperate in the future. So it was a worthwhile couple of days. So that is my report on the trip. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. And the very important third trip, the person who drew the long straw got to go to Azerbaijan. Governor Ash recently traveled there, and it was really important because what's happening in Azerbaijan goes to the core of what our mission is. So I'll ask Victor Ash to report on his trip.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me also say, add my welcome to Madam Secretary Stock being here. We eventually realized we both met each other in the 90s when she was the White House Social Secretary and I was President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and arranged an invitation for the mayors to come over and see the President in the East Room at that time. I was to visit Azerbaijan, which for those to follow up on what Governor Molov said, concerned about cost, I handled airfare. And other than lodging, money I've spent, but
Yes,
lodging,
right.
Lodging was paid for by the taxpayers. So it was a very economical trip to Baku from that standpoint. But even if it had been paying the full freight, I think it was a worthwhile visit in the sense that Azerbaijan, of course, is a former Soviet republic. It has transformed from a communist dictatorship to, shall we say, a family dictatorship. Not sure which is better or worse, but certainly one in which central authority is reposed in the president and his immediate staff. Mayors are not elected in that country. And as of about several years ago, they took RFE, RL off the government airwaves and were on the short waves, as it were, but which obviously has less coverage, substantially less coverage than would before. I was there for 3 days. Our ambassador there, Matt Reiser, is probably one of the most energetic and activist ambassadors one could envision, and certainly in a country where relations are different from time to time. But he arranged meetings that he accompanied me to the various ministries, including the chief of staff on the president's staff, on the presidential ministry, and to the Ministry of Information, basically to put before them the whole issue of restoring it. Secretary Clinton had been there previously 6 or 8 months earlier, as well as former Secretary Gates, to discuss the issue. I'm not saying that any breakthrough occurred, because it didn't. But on the other hand, they were forced to discuss the issue and hear the issue, and to the degree that Azerbaijan wants to have closer relationships and be with Western nations, we stress the fact that Western nations adhere to a free press and free speech, and the opportunity for the media to practice their work unhindered, and that unfavorable news. I point out during my time as mayor, I often read the morning newspaper and did not enjoy it, but I did not try to close the paper down or send them off anywhere, and that public officials of the United States are certainly used to reading stories they just as soon not read. But that's what I survived, and others survived as well, and that's part of a free press. Probably one of the most The ambassador also had a dinner with the representatives, not only of blog groups, but independent media. One journalist who had been in prison for a year for running a blog that then released. But it was a fascinating event. Then I went to, of course, the Office of Radio Liberty, and I think I'm the first governor since Jeff Hirschberg, which takes us back 6 or 7 years, to be there. And I think just showing up, let the staff and about 20 some odd employees there know that they're thought about, they're appreciated. They're a hardworking group of people. I can assure you it's not a plush office. It's a working office. Kanan Aliyev was the RL leader who works for RFE, RL, who helped set up that part of the visit. I participated in the Literary Award program, which they ran on the internet, where basically the listeners cast ballots to pick out who has the best story, the best essay. And I'm one of the few independent members of the Parliament was there present for the presentation. It was an interesting way to get there because it was on a back street, down an alley, and up the steps. But when you got up the steps, the place was packed with about 150 people who, as you went up the steps, you wondered, was anyone going to be on the second floor? But they were certainly there when I got there, and it was fascinating to see. I did meet with one morning with the ambassador, and if I'm pronouncing his name right, Elnula Fatulayev, who had just been pardoned by the president after 4 years in prison on an 8-year sentence for writing stories that the government determined were not accurate. And he presented me a letter, which I'm going to give to Chairman Higginson, which I'd like to read. But I think it sort of underlines what's so worthwhile about what RFE, RL, and the whole mission of BBG is about. And this could be from someone in Cuba, it could be someone in North Korea, or it could be from someone in other areas as well. Anyway, dear Mr. Higginson, I'm writing you as a free man, something I don't take for granted for a single minute as an independent journalist in Azerbaijan. I'm writing because I include the United States International Broadcasting, an RFB/RL Azerbaijani service, Radio Azli, if I'm pronouncing correctly, in particular, among those who fought against the injustice of my imprisonment and for my freedom for the last 4 years. Radio Azli was the only media outlet in Azerbaijan that reported continuously and fearlessly on my imprisonment. They monitored every trial, reported every court decision, published letters I wrote from prison. I listened to Radio Azli broadcast from my cell. We served the sentence against media freedom, against the right to question and the freedom to criticize together. I don't thank RFE only for moral support. I thank them for practicing honest, independent, and professional journalism, for their insistence on reporting the news and questioning authority unflinchingly, even when risky, even when inconvenient, even when so obviously against their immediate self-interest every day. Thank you.
Well, if we ever have to be reminded on why we support the brave journalists who for 60 years at RFE and for longer than that in all of U.S. international broadcasting do what they do, it's these type of letters. I also want to thank you, Victor, for taking that trip, doing it on your own dime, and representing the U.S. as well as the Broadcasting Board of Governors so ably. That was very great and very touching.
And I will conclude just by saying Azerbaijan it's not a total dictatorship. It's an interesting situation. We're off the government airwaves, but we are on the short airwaves. We do have an office of 20-plus people, and they have not been imprisoned at this yet. Hopefully won't ever be. But they have been permitted to continue reporting news, some of which is not favorable to the government of today. And so there is a modicum of press freedom, but obviously not at the level that we would consider appropriate. When we were put off the airways, it wasn't just us, it was camouflaged by the government, and that all foreign entities were taken off. Of course, we were the most prominent and probably the most effective. and we felt the brunt of it. But if you ask them about it, they'll say, well, we just took all the farm. So that's the party line. That's their story, and they're sticking to it.
Well, I think by your very visit, it actually increased a little bit. The fact that any country like that is never totally a dictatorship or totally free, but we always help nudge everything one more step towards freedom, and your visit did that, sir. The Strategy and Budget Committee has seemingly an interminable month after month, but for a full year has been doing a strategic review process. It has been, thanks to Anders Winbush, Michael Meehan, and the others, an incredibly thorough, open-minded, and very open process. We've had open meetings, we've had hearings, we've had meetings. We met today to go over some of the things with the entity heads. So I really want to congratulate you on such a good process, but also one that's been open and honest. Maybe you could give us an update on where you stand.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't been traveling, but
Yeah, you have.
I want to go to Miami one of these days and see Carlos. As you noted, this has been a year-long process. It's been a very intense and intensive process for looking at the broadcast environment that exists, and particularly thinking about the broadcast landscape that is emerging and will exist, or we can anticipate to exist going into the near and longer-term future. The strategic review over the course of the last year considered the agency's mission, its global operating environment, its distribution and technology efforts. It engaged in regional reviews in every region, every language service, and every broadcast network within the family of U.S. International Broadcasting. It has been a revealing effort. Many of the things that we have learned, we thought we might have known, but we didn't have it quite right. Many things we learned we didn't have right at all, and they surprised us. So we are now in the process of pulling together all of the facts on the ground and the lessons learned that have emerged from the process, and we are fashioning a strategic plan to recommend to the board as a vision for international broadcasting in the future. Now, this morning, our colleague Bruce Sherman, who has been deeply involved in this process with Michael Meehan and yours truly, briefed the board not once but twice in a very, very in-depth, laborious, fact-filled, enlightening, and I would say extremely engrossing briefing. And he pointed to some of the key trends and opportunities that are going to serve as the element of the board's strategic vision. We have identified opportunities to increase the size of our audience and the impact of our journalism. We have identified practical stretch targets for improving our distribution and programming effectiveness in key markets that we serve and key markets that we may serve. We've also described to the board in a variety of ways how U.S. international broadcasting, how the elements of international broadcasting can be brought together to increase efficiency, sharpen the strategic impact of our broadcasts, and to make the BBG one of the largest and most important sources of news, information, and audience engagement in the world. The committee has today asked the IBB director, Dick Lobo, to continue his work on the draft strategic plan based on these key objectives. And we have also requested a detailed implementation plan for the strategy. And we hope that by the time the September board comes around, board meeting comes around, that we will have a lot more to say on the implementation plan. And I just want to thank particularly Michael Meehan, my colleague, who is someplace on Cape Cod, I think, enjoying non-BBG underwritten travel, and I hope sitting in a boat with a line overboard, and Bruce Sherman for the particularly hard work that you put into this. That's my report, Mr.
Thank you for the good work. Any questions, by the way? I haven't paused in this meeting. The governance committee met yesterday, I heard, and covered issues dealing with the important relationship between the BBG and its grantee organizations, the future organization of the BBG. I must say, if I can, that the thoroughness of the reports that I've read, and you, especially Dennis, your amazing ability to deal with governance issues.
Nobody else wants to.
Because I think maybe we hadn't over the
He's
past.
really not a boring guy.
Well, he's not, but over the past maybe 20 years or so, we hadn't paid enough attention to it. And as I look at what you've done, it's just been awesomely good, both of these reports on. And I do think that there are certain reasons we are, these are not just changes for the sake of governance process, but it's because we are moving in hand in glove with the strategic plan, the strategic thinking, to bring all the grantee organizations and everything else into some more cohesive, workable, and efficient structure. So I wanted to set it up as a context of not just a governance committee report, but one that goes hand in glove with the strategy committee report, and to have you give your report to the full board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our meeting in June, I outlined several of the efforts we have pursued in the last year to improve the governance of the agency and United States International Broadcasting as a whole. Several of our decisions have focused on the relationships between the federal agency and the grantees. Today, I'd like to discuss the Government Committee's work regarding the revision of the grantees' grant agreements, but first I have a few other pieces of governance business. On a preliminary basis, I move that the board vote to officially add, for his sins, Governor Anders Wimbush as a member of the Governance Committee. He's been engaged in the Governance Committee business for months, and his input is greatly valued, and it's important to, as you say, to align governance work with strategy and budget work. So, Mr. Chairman, I move to add Governor Wimbush as a member of the Governance Committee.
Do I hear a second? Victor, the Governor Ash, has seconded that motion. Do I hear any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
The second matter of business is related to the IBB-BBG staff merger. At our October 14th meeting, the board directed that the IBB and BBG staffs be merged, with the IBB director serving as the head of the merged staff. In light of this decision, the board accepted revisions to a number of board decisions and procedures, including the rules of the road of U.S. International Broadcasting and the Governance Committee's terms of reference at our meeting to reflect the merger. The Governance Committee recommends that the plenary board adopt similar conforming amendments to the terms of reference of the Strategy and Budget and Communications and Outreach Committees. These are attached to the draft Governance Committee report, which is has been provided to you. I know it's exciting. So, Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of the revised terms of reference with conforming amendments.
Do I hear a second of that motion?
Second.
From Governor McHugh.
Mr. Chairman,
And and we'll have discussion. Go ahead, Victor.
I'm just going to say, reserving the right to agree or disagree with developments. I'd request to be listed as abstaining on the vote.
Sure. When we have a vote, you'll be listed as abstaining. I would. This is not, just a perfunctory thing. I think we are truly trying to streamline things and make this good for the American taxpayer and all the money. And I want to compliment Dick Lobo because we have, we sort of had a staff for the Broadcasting Board of Governors and a staff for international broadcasting. I think if you were a normal person coming in, you'd say, why did, isn't there some duplication? And instead of taking the money away from the journalists in the field whenever there's, budget cuts, I think the fact that we've been able to just merge these two and really streamline things is just very commendable. So there is a motion, there is a second, and I'll have a full-fledged vote so the people can say can. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. And one abstention, I think, is that right, Victor? And one abstention should be noted. Governor Wimbush.
Okay.
Governor Mohawk. Yeah.
At yesterday's committee meeting, the Governance Committee focused primarily on the revision of the agreements between the BBG and its grantees. These agreements cover nearly one-third of the agency's budget, nearly $250 million, and are of critical importance to the implementation of the agency's agenda and strategy. the board has been guided by two principles when making decisions regarding the grantees. First, the board has looked to take advantage of the operational flexibility of the private grantees. Second, we have tried to encourage greater cooperation and collaboration between the elements of United States international broadcasting in the effort to move towards a much more unified strategy. With those principles in mind, the board decided in December 2010 that the terms and conditions of the grant agreements should be revised to correspond to the operational realities of the relationships between the BBG and each respective grantee. The legal and financial staffs of the BBG and respective grantees have been meeting regularly to discuss principles for revision of the grant agreements and language for the grant agreements. At yesterday's governance committee meeting, the committee considered a pre-decisional draft agreement submitted by BBG staff for discussion purposes. The committee has requested BBG staff to continue working with the grantees in order to prepare a fully developed draft review, consideration, and possible approval at the board's September 2011 meeting. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
I assume that's not an action item.
That is not an act. That's just the information that we continue to ask the staff to work with the grantees to come to consensus, if possible, on the terms of the grant agreements.
That's very, very good. We certainly appreciate it. Having lavished praise on IBD Director Dick Lobo, I'll now ask you to update the board on the activities of the International Broadcasting Bureau, which, as we say, is now more merged. So you're reporting both with your hat as the President of the Board of Governors of International Broadcasting and as somebody who is in charge of our strategic operations as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of updates and a couple of new items to report on. One that we've been hearing about a great deal. Want to remind you that the BBG received an additional $10 million from Congress for its Internet Anti-Censorship and Internet Freedom program in April. And our spending plan was approved by the Congress on June 14th. And to expedite the process, the BBG issued an RFP, a request for proposal, on June 2nd. And as a result, we obtained proposals by June 30th, just a short time ago, 2 weeks after the approval by Congress. We expect to start making awards in August. And senior BBG officials met just this past Monday with members of the State Department to make sure that our respective programs are coordinated and complementary. So that is moving forward very rapidly. Last month, the Russian Duma passed amendments to Russian media laws. These amendments are due to take effect in November. They are ambiguously worded and could impact negatively on BBG operations in the country. So we're assessing the impact of the new regulations in concert with the Department of State, and we'll keep you posted on where this goes. On the 4th of July, this past week, the BBG officially launched an FM station in Bangui. It was attended by President Boise Zay and U.S. Ambassador Wohlers. It was an overwhelming success and viewed by most Central Africans as a very tangible symbol of the USA's engagement with the CAR. And finally, in the category of be careful what you wish for, 67% of the agency's employees completed the agency's annual employee survey. This compares to 62% last year and 35% in 2008. And this year's government-wide average rate was 49%. So we don't know what to expect, but we'll have the results probably by the end of the summer.
Thank you. It is very important to people throughout the agency. It's amazing work. May I call on Governor Ash, please?
Well, first of all, I just want to congratulate VOA and Dick Lobo on securing the president's appearance on VOA.
Yeah, I just saw we had it on the screen a moment ago.
We
too.
saw it.
Yeah.
But it continues the tradition that started with FDR in terms of president participating. Secondly, and I only just read this, maybe you can help, and normally the board doesn't do it, but it looks like we might. On the labor relations issue, it says the agency's local chapter of the American Federation of Government Employees apparently wants to meet with the board. And it says here, we're proceeding to make arrangements for a meeting at the board's convenience. What's that all about?
I think early on, when this board was sworn in last year, I think they made a commitment to meet with the labor unions, and we're following
I don't have any problem, don't get me wrong,
We should meet with
but I just kind of want to know more about it, and, or is it something that'll be in next month?
They're eager.
In September, or,
We don't have a date yet, but our staff is working on it, and as soon as we
Great.
confirm a date where all of you or most of you are available, we'll do it.
or maybe when we're here anyway in
Yeah.
September, and obviously I assume we'll be briefed on what the issues are that we're not in the position of resolving the issues.
Yep, and we definitely should allow the management and staff to be in charge of labor relations and not have any back channels here, and we trust Dick Lobo very much on that. The Office of Cuba Broadcasting, now you're a veteran. Now that Steve Korn's here, you're not the new kid on the block, so you'll have to give a serious report.
Still feel that way, Mr. Chairman.
Right, well,
Thank you so much. Let me start by saying that we are at the Martiz, we're looking at our entire transmission strategy, and we had a very good meeting with Andrew Mendez's group. He responded to us very quickly. I met with his, I want to call them top lieutenants. You know, they seem to know what they were doing, so I congratulate you on that, and thank you. So that was a very good meeting. As the board has said on numerous occasions, at the Martiz, we are platform agnostic. We're not married to one single way of delivering the content. So it's very important what Andrew Mendez team is doing for us at this point. Having said that, we are also at the Martiz have focused a little bit more on new media. New media, we think it's efficient and delivers the goods right away. That's taking into consideration the environment in which we operate. Certainly, the Cuban government tries to restrict access to the internet, tries to interfere with our signals. So we are well aware of that, but we still have to explore that medium for its efficiency and its results. On 2008, there were less than 400,000 cell phone users on the island. As of this year, there's over 1 million cell phone users on the island. So that is a field that we really want to explore. In addition to that, so we're saying we're doing this based on facts and research. Ioannis Sanchez yesterday was at the New American Foundation function. Ioannis Sanchez is a very famous Cuban blogger, as you all know, creator of Generation X, and she calls her island the island of the disconnect. And it was very telling, her testimony on how Twitter, in August of 2007, changed her life, and how she uses Twitter to connect to the outside world. So we're really pursuing initiatives in new media and Twitter, and I have several examples here on how we have been able to report to our audience incidents inside the islands through Twitter.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
But before we get totally off on Twitter, I want to make sure you're going to also give us the All-Star Game wrap-up.
Oh, that's to the end.
Okay.
That's the end. And thanks for reminding me.
Like you needed to be reminded, right?
The Lima Cruz brothers trial was going on in Holguin several months ago, and a journalist from Holguin, or actually a Lima Cruz brother, texted to a journalist in Havana about what was going on during the trial. Basically, the regime was not allowing some of the opposition to get out of their homes and go to the site of the trial. So the Lima brothers text to this journalist in Havana, who at the same time posted a tweet, obviously on the internet, for the entire world to find out what was going on. So it was from Holguin to Havana to the world in less than 10 minutes. And it was fascinating for us to report that incident. The other example that I would like to share with the board and the audience is when the Bin Laden killing took place on a Sunday, we sent text messages on Monday morning at 1 o'clock in the morning. That same day, we were receiving calls from our audience that they were receiving text messages about the Bin Laden news. That's when I think we really started to execute and implement and see results on the multimedia operation. We were very proud of that, and very exciting to all of us that are involved with the Martiz. We are receiving pictures and videos through very limited basis through internet. We're starting a strategy, an email strategy very soon. So we're very excited about what's going on with the new media. Now to the baseball game. The chairman didn't want me to forget about that. On Tuesday, we broadcast the Major League All-Star game to Cuba. And we use, I'm proud to say, all platforms. The play-by-play was done on radio with a color commentator of Orlando El Duque Hernandez, who I'm sure you all know. If you don't know him, he won 4 World Series rings when he came here. He's an icon in Cuba. Every time he's on one of our shows, the calls start to pour in. He did it for free. He did it for his country. So we really commend him for that, and we really appreciate what he's done. What he's done. It was a network class broadcast. It was wonderful. I was actually there. I bought the pizzas. I thought, I hope that's not a problem that I bought pizzas for the staff. Thank you. But I was listening to our competition, and that means stateside play-by-play calling, and we have nothing to envy to that production. It was truly, truly a professional endeavor. So, and we use all platforms, radio, TV. We were tweeting, and we were sending text messages on the scores and what was going on the game. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm not a rookie anymore, so I hope I pass the test.
Thank you very much. Speaking of rookies, Mr. Korn, do you have something you wanted to add? Or?
Yeah, I realized from your comment to Carlos that I have a free pass here and I don't have to give a substantive report. So, I would just say that I'm phasing in to the job. I officially went on the payroll on Monday, and to use the old expression, I've been drinking from a fire hose ever since. I had about a 6-week period where I was, as I said, an unpaid intern. It's beginning to immerse myself, and we don't go to Prague permanently until the 1st of September, but I find sitting here today that although I can't go for personal reasons, I'm quite anxious and excited to get there. I realize there are things that I really can't do until I get there, so I'm very much looking forward to it and excited by what I've seen so far and the quality of the staff, and I hope the next time we report to you, I'll get a similar pass so I won't have to sweat it.
Libby Lou, Radio Free Asia had a very nice visit from the Dalai Lama, thanks to your invitation, and perhaps you can report on that. Anything else you would like?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we had the great honor of hosting His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Governors McHugh and Ash were there, Dick Lobo, Jeff Trimble, and Diane Zeleny. We had a quality private meeting with him and the long-serving past Prime Minister as well as the newly elected Prime Minister. He had a quite an extensive interview with our Mandarin service, which, at his request, taking questions from Tibetans, Uyghurs, Mandarins, and Cantonese, which is a very important endeavor of his. And then he greeted the staff. This is the first time in 14 years His Holiness has been to RFA, and we are really, really thrilled. Tomorrow we will be welcoming the Karmapa Lama. He is the 3rd Lama in the religion. As you know, the Pachin Lama has gone mysteriously missing, so we are very much looking forward to that. I also wanted to say that the 2 new diginatives, they came over to RFA, and we are supercharged about our conversation. I'm so happy they're techies, and we can talk about, all the new things and exciting things that we can do. So that's my report.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just add to what Mrs. Lewis said, and of course Governor McHugh was there as well with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was a very moving visit. But the thing that stuck with me, and again it follows up to a little bit with Azerbaijan, but obviously by broadcasting into Tibet, which is obviously occupied by the Chinese government, he assured us, even in the remote areas where they're not large cities, that is the source of news. And obviously he has sources of information there that the average person wouldn't have. It just validates the money that's been spent in terms of letting people have information that frankly the occupying government does not provide to them through their news broadcasts.
Thank you. The acting VOA director, Steve Reddish.
I'm the rookie, actually.
The rookie. The veteran rookie. You're there's somebody in the All-Star game who you're comparable to, but like the old great Yankees, you've been reunited with a teammate, and who will be joining us.
Joining in a couple of weeks. He'll be here in August 3rd, first day at work.
David Ensor, who worked with you and us many as a great reporter. So why don't you give us your report?
Just a couple of things. We also had the Dalai Lama as one of several interviews that VOA has done over the past month. Dalai Lama interview took place on Tuesday, and also yesterday we had an interview with one of the latest Burmese defector, the first secretary of the U.S. Embassy here, the Burmese embassy here in the United States, and he told us that morning that he was defecting, and told our Burmese service why, and he's the second defector from the Burmese embassy within the last few weeks, and our Burmese service is keeping tabs on that situation. But the biggest interview over the past few weeks has been with President Obama, and I want to. Before we roll the clip, I want to thank the chairman and the other governors who helped secure this interview. And while I've been accepting a lot of congratulations, I also look at it as not just the VOA interview. This is a BBG interview, and we did have it out to all of the BBG entities, and it was used on various other platforms. So let's roll the clip first, and we can talk about it in a moment.
Mr. President, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us. Inevitably, when one talks about Afghanistan, one talks about Pakistan. And now that we're beginning the withdrawal from Afghanistan, has the focus now shifted on Pakistan?
Well, I think the focus shifted to Pakistan, or at least my view 2 years ago was that you had to look at Afghanistan and Pakistan as part of a similar problem. That border region in which extremist elements had taken control and were providing al-Qaeda safe haven from which to launch attacks into Afghanistan, into Pakistan, and around the world. And so we've sought to strengthen cooperation with Pakistan. Obviously, that has created tensions as well, but overall, Pakistan has cooperated with us in our intelligence collection efforts, in striking at high-value targets within Pakistan. We think that no country has suffered more from terrorist attacks than Pakistan, and so this is entirely in their self-interest.
Mr. President, thank you for your time.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's not the entire interview.
That's not the entire interview. I didn't want to have you sit through the whole 14 or 16 minutes of the interview, but I chose that clip especially because while the White House tried to keep us on message about Afghanistan and the speech that he was to deliver later that evening, and Afghanistan only, I was very proud of Andre Dinesner to try and get the president to talk about the wider issue of Afghanistan, Pakistan. We would have loved to have gotten in a question about Iran and several other hotspots, but time didn't permit it, and it was a well-received interview. Our Pakistan affiliate, Express News 24, picked that up and ran it in its entirety. Several other affiliates ran it in its entirety. It was the feature on one of Kenya's main news websites, so it got very good pickup as well as distribution through APTN and Reuters video service. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the best practices guide that I directed Steve Springer, one of my VOA colleagues, to help develop. It finally writes down. No, it's not my. Well, then I'll be very quick. I'd like for you all, I left a copy for everybody to read. It writes down the best practices that VOA is going to follow. It includes best practices for social media, how-tos for various different ways of distributing content. Steve is in Miami right now with Katerina Lyson from General Counsel to do seminars on this best practices guide. It can be a template for best practices across the BBG, and I wanted to give everybody a copy for your home
I've
reading.
been reading it, and it's great. Really appreciate it, Steve. All you've been doing, to run VOA in the interim. And if there's been the Arab Spring, but it's also been the spring of Middle East broadcasting networks. And we talked earlier today, especially Governor Wimbush, about how you, Brian, and your entire team, at this time of news, truly stepped up and reminded us, as we are every day, but reminded us truly why we're in this business. And the fact that you were the first and the last in Tahrir Square, and that even this morning Al-Yum is broadcasting live from Tahrir Square and taking things. It's just been an awesome spring for showing what Al-Hurra, Radio Sawa, and others can do. So maybe you can update us and even tell us a little bit about Al-Yum, which will be the next big story coming around since you've created some great programming now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. But on the theme of cooperation, I did want to mention a co-production that Al-Hurra and VOA are working on right now, which I think is unique and could be indicative of things we can do in the future. We're doing a half-hour documentary profiling Teaneck, New Jersey, which has a long history of religious tolerance. The peg for the story is the mayor is Arab American and the deputy mayor is Jewish. And this has been going on for some time, and it's quite a great story. But the way we're doing it with this co-production with VOA is really interesting. For instance, VOA provides the camera, we'll do the editing. We'll produce it in a way that there's no host on air, or all be narration, which allows VOA to version it in any number of languages. We'll obviously do it in Arabic. And we'll simulcast it the week of 9/11. It's a 9/11 themed program. Our whole week is going to be religious tolerance, the week of 9/11. But anyhow, I just thought it's a small project, but I think it's reflective of a lot of things we can do collectively as we go forward. Another interesting little detail, we were recently able to get a beacon into Yemen. The government has been controlling all uplinks. So I don't want to say we smuggled it in, but we kind of went around the normal process and got it in, and have already successfully got some lives and packages out of it. We're trying to do similar things in Libya and in other locations where either the provider is controlled by the government or the government is the provider. On the same basic theme, Andre's group has been of great help getting an FM set up in Benghazi, and it's scheduled for mid-August, the latest. The transmitter is in Alexandria right now, and we hope to get it across shortly. And then one last point, as I said in the corporate meeting, I was in Cairo a couple of weeks ago, and trying to find out what are the new red lines, if there are any. One of the things I did pursue was a Radio Sawa transmitter, FM transmitter, something we've always wanted, and we've been turned down repeatedly by the Minister of Information. I didn't come away with the transmitter, but he at least said he'd sign the frequency over if I gave him $15 million. So I guess we've established that it's up for sale. It's just we have to find it.
Was that personally or government?
After the meeting, and we had subsequent meetings on this issue, he has asked me to submit a formal offer, not only for that, but maybe we can lease time on their existing stations. Maybe we can put our news on. They have a station very similar to Sawa that has music, and they're looking for some financial relief. So I'll get an offer together, and we'll see what happens. We obviously want to penetrate that radio marketplace. It's huge, 82 million people in the country, and it's a location that's completely controlled by the government. So I'm sure overnight we could bringing millions, literally, of visitors. Anyhow, those are just the highlights from the last few days.
Dick, did you want anything else? All right.
Is there any other items for discussion or action? I urge both the governors and to work with Dick Lobo. Our next meeting will be in September. We'll have a lot of work to do, as always, on the strategy committee. And until then, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved by Governor Esch, seconded by Governor Wimbush. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is 1 minute to 5. Let the record show. One, may I? Do what I always do. Leave the crowd, but some of it is probably